Hey, we're speaking about tragedy in the vast, also subtitles, or How I Became a Poet, play one of the Big Four quartet. And this is the first play of this quartet. The next one is Reasons, Not the Reasons. Both derive their title from Jeffers. I'm assuming you're going to... No. Tragedy in the Vast derives its title from Rexroth, and then Reasons, But Not the Reasons from Jeffers.
Yeah.
But I think that this play is the better play between the two of them. We're going to talk about con plays. I really think a lot of them. But speak about this. The subtitle comes from the James Manuel poem, and it's dedicated directly to him.
Yeah.
This is the girl that you initially started writing poems for, too.
Right, and this is actually the first thing I've written about that girl since about 1984. So it's been 35 years since I've written about it, when I first wrote love poems for her. And first of all, these two plays are the first two plays of what I call the Big Four plays. And when I say the Big Four, in high school, there were four girls that I had on sort of my list that these are one of these four girls I'm gonna woo and marry and whatnot. And their names were Charlotte and Francine and Kathy and Danuta. And so I've done these first two plays. Tragedy in the Vast is on Charlotte. Reasons, But Not the Reason is on Francine. And is one of those things that when I was a kid, as you know from some of my other books, I had a lot of connections with underworld, what I call the sub-underworld type people, the people lower than just gangsters. And one of the things that I did have a connection with was when I was in the gang. I was the only white kid in a Puerto Rican, mostly Puerto Rican, but Hispanic gang. And there were these two Jewish kids that worked in what was called the program office back then of Franklin K. Lane. And this was 1980 to 83, so this is like the dinosaur age of computers. And so whenever Paco, who was the head of the gang I was in, or someone else needed information on someone who was going to the school, I'd be sent to negotiate with these kids. And there were two of them. There was a slightly tall. They were both shrimps. One was a little bit taller than the other, and he got me the information, and I would, and eventually I got the information about these girls, where they lived, their phone numbers, and in the attempt to woo them. But that basically ended with this first girl and my failed attempt to woo her.
And I wanted to speak a little bit about the Rexroth quotation, which I thought was interesting, and I'll read it for you. What might have been and what might be fall equally away with what is, and leave only the ideograms printed on the immortal hydrocarbons of flesh and stone, which is a very interesting slant epigraph, and it takes you almost totally away from the main thrust of the drama, but it works once you contextually put it in its place. I also noticed this, you use a lot of poems in your plays. For a play about how you became a poet, it has scant poems too, which is undercutting the expected.
Yes, and that's what you do as a good writer. But it's another thing too is the Rexroth poem that it's from is Lyell's hypothesis again, and that's Charles Lyell, the famous British geologist in the 18th century, who had the idea of sedimentation, and that you could go down, the further down you went, the further back in time you went. And so that's what the hypothesis he's talking about. And so here we're going back in time.
Law of superposition?
No, the superposition is physics. This is Charles Lyell, geology. But we're going back in time here with Danny, and this is basically about Danny and the girl that he started writing poems for. Now this is one of the plays where I enjoy the Danny character more than I usually do, and that's because Danny here is a wise ass, and he's not just old Danny just declaiming. It's young Danny here, and he's trying to woo this girl, and he's back talking to some of the teachers, and it's a much more enlivened Danny. Danny hasn't been beaten down to the extent that the real life me has been.
I just looked it up. It is the law of superposition.
Superposition has to do with physics.
It's a stratigraphic dating. I think they named it. It comes from
Okay.
William Stratus Smith.
Okay. But
These laws, though, they don't matter anyway. But they're named inconsequentially often. But I also wanted to speak a little bit of the character of Charlotte. I think this is the scene that I was talking about where you use elements of melodrama in it. And then she has this disgusting boyfriend that so angers Danny that he ends up going and slamming the door behind him. But it's a very powerful moment. It uses that silent scene in it as well.
okay, now I'm just looking, before we do that, I'm just looking at superposition principle, Wikipedia, that a linear system, the net response caused by two or more stimuli is the sum of responses that would have been caused by each stimulus individually. So quantum superposition, that's a physics term. Where are you getting that with Charles Lyell?
Law of superposition. That's a geology term. If you go to
Superimposition, you said?
Superposition. SUPERSOS. I mean POSITION. Law of superposition.
Okay, because off the top of my head, I get the law of superposition is an action that forms on the base of sun. Okay, so it's the same word that means two different things, because I think of physics mostly when I think of superposition. But okay, yeah. But anyway, I'm sorry.
Digression apart.
But what were you saying about the Charlotte character again? I'm sorry.
I was saying that this is the scene that I was talking about. Your plays play so often with memory that I often get things jumbled up between what title it's in and
me too.
But the character of Charlotte, she has this disgusting boyfriend. I think he's like 20 or 30 years older than her.
Yeah. And
he confronts Danny after he's trying to get Charlotte to get back to her senses, and Danny is rejected by her. She tells him to leave him alone, and the boyfriend chews Danny out. It goes to a silent scene, and then use an element of melodrama that may appear at the end of a play, but it doesn't end here. And he slams the door, and it's a very powerful moment.
Well, that actually happened. More than that, there's the underlying thing that's never stated within the play. I don't believe I stated it in the play, is that over the years, I think that the Charlotte character was probably molested or sexually abused as a child, because why would a girl, and she was very smart, she was in the honors classes, Arista, which was a thing back in the 70s and 80s. Why would a smart girl next door, pretty girl, a girl that has some yearnings seemingly for more. There's a good scene where Danny and she are doing Liza and Higgins from Pygmalion, and that really happened. That was one of the things that got me smitten with her. She did this faux Cockney accent, and I really loved that. But anyway, why would she be with a guy who's old enough to be her father? I actually, in real life, thought that this creep was her father. And the only thing I can think of, and I think the play implies it, is that there was something wrong with Charlotte, that she was molested, or she was, something went awry, whether it was by this guy or whether it was by someone else years earlier. Because why would someone go like that? That would be like, if I was her age at 18 or 19 and I was the boy toy of a 42 or 45-year-old woman. There's something creepy and whatnot. And that's the thing that underlies that. And it also has to do with the creepiness of a lot of the people there. We find out about a couple of teachers that were having affairs or something. We know that Danny is exchanging sex with some of these prostitutes to get information with one of the Jewish guys. We know that the two they're called the computer Jews, are these two gay guys who one
those scenes are absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
With how what are their names again? They have very hoity-toity kind of names.
I think I call them in the play
Eldon, yes,
Adam and Eldon.
And Adam calls him Ellie all the time, and Ellie ends up crying.
Yeah.
Because of Adam's distance.
Yeah. Well, but another thing too, and I just forgotten it. The play starts off, I think, very strongly because there's a character, and this is what brought back the Charlotte and made me want to do the play. Was there's this girl at the store I work at now here in Texas who comes to the Starbucks, and she's a nice enough looking girl. She reminds me of Charlotte, but she's a prettier, sexier version of Charlotte. She's probably college age to 25 at the oldest. She's got a nice ass, but I feel kind of creepy looking at her because she's like 30 years younger than me or something. But by the same token, I look at her when I see her, and I haven't seen her since writing the play actually, because she reminds me so much of this Charlotte, a prettier and sexier version of Charlotte, and that brought Charlotte back. So there's this whole theme of sex that entwines it. We start off literally seeing the girl's ass. The
opening was, in my opinion, the best thing of the play. It was the most memorable. It was sort of like a very inventive Stargate sequence, but with realer implications.
Yeah.
Where you have the Waltons dialogue and the Nixon dialogue, and the foreman and the workman, and how they're interacting at all points in it. And then I think some of the characters in it, like the foreman and the workman, they come back later, and Danny throws the ladder down and then runs for it from the foreman.
Which comes from Godzilla's Revenge. I wanted to add that thing in where he kicks the painter guy. But to me, the highlight, the center of the play is when Danny and Charlotte get intermingled with Higgins and Liza. And this is a good example with this play where I'm getting very close to what I was doing in Vincetti Brothers, and especially in A Norwegian in the Family, using other works of art. But it's so essentially that you get, because if you know the Shaw play Pygmalion, and you know the Higgins-Liza relationship, that's totally the opposite in a sense. With it, Danny is the supplicant to the Charlotte character. Danny is trying to prove himself to Charlotte rather than Liza to Higgins, and so you have this whole power struggle, this dimension there. You have Danny. One of my favorite scenes is when Danny is wising off to the social studies teacher, and we see 6 or 7 scenes of him coming in late to class, and basically, the teacher eventually gives up, and that actually happened because I had a class. It was at 7:45 in the morning, and I believe it might have been English. Yeah, I think it was English, and I would always come in late because I was like, I was so far ahead. This was so easy that
here's one of the sections that I thought was hilarious. Oh, wait, class, look, it's Mr. Wagner again, gracing us with his presence. Oh, thank you, Lord, for delivering Mr. Wagner into our midst. Was it long sojourn? Mr. Wagner, did you have a hard time of it? I mean, you're only 11 minutes late today. Danny, yeah, I know. That's because your daughter couldn't get enough of sucking my cock. You said it was extra salty today. Teacher, my daughter, who the hell do you? And then it cuts. And you have a lot of these little disses all between it.
Yeah, and I was like that as a kid. I was wising because most of these teachers in public school in New York, and even when I worked as a custodian, like in the custodian's pitch, some of the teachers are just bad. And in New York, 30 plus years ago, the teachers were generally bad. They didn't give a shit, and they were ripe, and it was right to mock them. But it gives you a really, I think, great sense of the time and the place and the era there. And Danny's relationship with Charlotte, or when lack of relationship, is a good one there. And interestingly, I didn't realize it at the time, even though this play comes directly on the heels of Lana's. I ended it very similarly to Lana's. Lana's ends with Lana Abbey, the little blonde girl with the curls, in the spotlight. And this play ends with Danny. It says, Danny walks upstage toward the school hallway image. Before he hits it, the lights black out. Spotlight on the face of a small white blonde boy with eyeglasses. He smiles. The spotlight goes out. So that, along with the beginning that you said was a bravura section with the workmen and whatnot, there you have the fingerprints of Ingmar Bergman all over it. You know,
you're not talking about, yeah, it reminded me of Persona. You're not talking about the scene that comes before that too, where you talk about how artists tie things together, and you use sections of the James Emmanuel poem, and then like magic, a string that's on the ground comes into your hand.
right? And you know where that's from? You know where I got that idea from?
Where's the difference?
Stalker by Tarkovsky. Have you ever seen that one? The ending,
The end of Stalker,
right?
the
Where the little girl pushes the glass off with her mind. I wanted to do the reverse, have something come to it. And so, yeah, and so I'm tying in James Emmanuel. I'm tying in Tarkovsky and Bergman, and this is how you tie together things. I'm actually that one simple little thing of you know, whatever device that would have to be used for the little string that people see to come to Danny's hand ties together things. This again is just not only, if forget how it's written. This is an example. I said how the writing that to the end of the prior play was just great writing, as well as great drama. This is great drama that's visual, and this
you should read the first paragraph of page 63. This is an example of how you explain it in the play.
I have page 60. I've got 62 pages here. Maybe you've got 63. But Davy's a psychopath. What it is?
And it starts with, and then I pivot internally, and Charlotte is just fodder.
Oh yeah, it just yeah. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a long thing, but I mean, yeah, and I think Tom had said he thought this was like the best play. I don't know if he read the Kahn plays, but this is a good example. Is if I compare this play back to even the first two plays that I wrote, which were 51,000 and 59,000 words long. This play, let me see here, word count. This is 29,000 words, just shy, about 300 words shy of 30,000. So this is about half as long as the longest play that I've written. Although this musical will probably go longer because of all the song lyrics and whatnot. But in a sense, this is a much richer play, even than that play with, you know, my father and Aunt Darla, and that's a great play. And that's the thing that really excites me about art and invigorates me, is that I can do something. And even when if I look back at old poems that I wrote 20 years ago versus the poems that I wrote only in the last year or two before I stopped writing poems, or if I look back at even some moments in some of the smaller early novels I did, like Bit of Golem, and then I compare them to my heroic trilogy, there's great writing there, and it's undeniable. I look at some of Jessica's early books, and there's great writing there. It's not as concentrated, as example, as some of our latest stuff, because we've gotten better, but you can't deny the greatness there. Just like I can't deny that those first two plays were great, and I would say that I start out at minimum at an equal level or slightly above the best plays that ever written right there. I've gone so far beyond it. This Charlotte play is so much richer and more poetic, and the technique and the complex. And this is again, this is why art is. You can be great and what. Try to think, if you look at any other kind of discipline, philosophy, you know, how do you can't, there's no way to get, you know, you're going by 10 to the 10 powers more richly here in just this arc of 50 plays. You can't proceed like that in philosophy or science. I mean, and every play that I've done has a lesson for me to learn for the next play to get better, even if it's not a more complex play, like the next play after this, which is actually written 2 plays later about this girl Francine, is not as complex a play as the Charlotte play, but that was an intentional choice to strip it down. But anyway,
you know, that's true too. Is that Woody Allen has in Hannah and Her Sisters a quote where he talks about how he's thought like the great philosophers, and he doesn't see much difference between them. The great Greek philosophers specifically, and many people are able to have memories that connect one memory to another, just as you do at the end of play, but few great people, unlike great artists, can tie them together.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I've talked about. We were talking before about some young people that we know, and I still get tons of emails from people, or I argue with people on Twitter or something, and I'm just stunned with how one-dimensional and binary most people think. They have no ability to get beyond the thing. We got to support Bernie Sanders. We got to do this. We got to get rid of Trump. We got to get and they don't have an ability to see a problem. I mean, I can read something. I can be presented with a situation, and not always, but maybe 80% of the time, it's rather easy and apparent what to do. In art, for example, after I go over something, like when I was writing this musical yesterday, I was finishing, I think, scene 15 or 16. I've done 15 or 16 because what I'm going to do is write all the scenes initially. Then I'm going to go through and make the musical, the initial rock opera musical fully formed, and then I'll do the alternate scenes so that I have some time to do it. But anyway, these things. Anyway, I forgot my point now. But there you go. There's the way the mind works. Is that things flit in and out. That's why I write a lot of things down. Jessica always makes fun of me for carrying a notepad or whatnot. But it's good that I carry the notepad because I can write these things down, and otherwise those things would be gone. I mean, yes, I could show you if I'm turning. You don't see it, but people. Whoops. There you can see my laptop, and you can see a whole host of multicolored sheets and whatnot. And those are initial ideas from a year and a half or so ago for plays. When I was working at the school system as a custodian, and I've got 25 ideas for plays that I haven't even touched yet because I've had all these other ideas come in between. But there's going to come a time when I'm in a rut, and I'll open one and I'll say, oh, bang, that'll be the one I'm going to do next. So you always save ideas. This is why you should never throw away something if you're an artist. You never burn your old work. You should never. You should always have that there because the mind, if you're really going like an engine, it feeds on itself and it just keeps turning. It's like constantly shoveling coal into the whatchamacallit, the engine.